Now we're going to talk about something that I think has already moved the industry extremely fast over the last 2 years, and that's carbon markets, specifically carbon removal markets. And we're switching up the order of the presenters. It was a little different here than it was on your booklets. So first off, we're going to hear from Arnaud de France, the VP of Funding Solutions for Puro, which way back in 2019, I think was the very first carbon removal marketplace. And then they were the first to create a biochar methodology. And since then, things have really taken off. But Arnaud is here to talk about lifting the barriers to entry for biochar producers to access the carbon market. So, and we'll take Q&A at the end.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Arnaud de France, so you can guess, well, I'm a French national. I've been working for Puro for a year and a half, and prior to that, I've been putting a lot of efforts trying to fund renewable energy, so carbon reduction projects. And now I've been focusing on finding funding solutions, trying to direct capital and lift impediments for project developer for biochar, and help monetize their operation. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Puro, and it is quite a complex, the carbon crediting is a complex value chain, and there's been also some announcement on our side that we're not a marketplace, as was introduced here. We are, first of all, a standard, and we offer registry services for the carbon credits to monetize for negative emissions associated with the biochar operation. So the standard, as mentioned, we had the first version of biochar methodology by 2019. It was reviewed in 2022 and continuously improved to be pragmatic and readable for majority of people. And the verification is, of course, done by third-party auditors. And after that, we issue what we called CORCs, so carbon removal certificates. We are a standard. We've been the first one in the world to have developed, well, all of these methodologies. So biochar was the first one with the biomass burial, geologically remove carbon. So it includes BECCS, DACS, bio-CCS, carbonated building elements, and enhanced rock weathering was our latest last winter. And now we're working on ocean-based carbon removal, ocean alkalinity enhancement, aquatic biomass burial. So these methodologies are approved by independent advisory boards that takes decision on the new methodologies, the changes, and you may recognize some familiar faces here. It's chaired by Marcel from Oxford Net Zero. And a little bit on the trends. So the carbon removals as a revenue stream for biochars is becoming more and more relevant. And those are a few numbers on the issuance of CORCs. So you can see some multiplications happening, and we are hoping to multiply issuance by 5 to 10 this year. CORC, as I said, so it's a carbon dioxide removal certificates. It's something that's easy to quantify because we operate only on the verification, on verified basis by third-party auditor. And it includes the capture, the stabilization, and the storage. So the capture is the easy part. You need to also stabilize it and store it. And biochar is very reliable way of doing this. And 1 ton of CO2 removed, quantified, is then a CORC, a digital asset that's issued on our registry that can be sold to companies that can that want to neutralize emission they cannot reduce. So we're, of course, encouraging reduction, but we all know that even if we do our very best, there will still be some emission that we need to neutralize. So our business model has been, and that's the theme of this presentation, is how to lift the impediments. And our business model is all about lifting impediments in different ways. So we do not charge upfront costs when we issue the certificates. So we start earning money only when the projects are receiving money from the carbon removals. And there is no methodology cost development on our side. There is just an annual fee member to cover costs for the maintenance of the websites, etc. No project registration costs, that's important. So we try, biochar, as you know, is already capital intensive, and we want to lift as much upfront capital as possible. The verification step, we, Puro, pay for the auditors to actually go and verify the quantity of CO2 that have been removed. And this way, we have incentive to issue only quality carbon credits from good projects, because if we would credit from bad projects, they don't sell, we don't get any revenue, we've paid for the audit for nothing, we lost money. So it aligns interest with the project developers, it guarantees a certain level of integrity and quality in the certificates with such a business model. We do not charge issuance, and then we have a service fee, which in average is 8%. Now it's updated, so it will be a function of volume and price. And this can happen, if the project developers sell the certificate directly or via our sales channel partners. Some of them are present and going to speak today after me, or directly or using our network. And then there is this option for buyers that bought too much to sell them forward. And an example here would be if a project is going only with Puro and selling at 100 euro per cork, project gets 92. If it uses a marketplace, sells at 115, and the marketplace takes their 15, the 92 goes to the project developer. So I don't want to stay too long on this. This is something we launched to help projects get money earlier and de-risk. Is called pre-corks. They are digital assets. They are not a carbon credits. They're carbon assets representing a future cork that will be verified in the future. It's a way to channel prepayments. And to do that, we do it carefully, mitigating non-delivery risks. And one pre-cork gives a right of one cork from a specific facility later on. It does not allow environmental claim. It just is there to help projects to get the funding and the buyers to put their hands on the future cork to be produced and verified. Then it is a registry in the assets, and that's also transferable and tradable to the buyers. And there are some risk mitigation rules that we take quite seriously to not, over credit those things, and we help projects go through a commercial and technical assessment. Those who qualify for this can issue pre-cork and receive prepayment, basically, for their future negative emissions. The advantage of this is that it helps, of course, raising funds, because it is quite challenging. As it is capital intensive, it supports the sales also, gives some commercial traction. You see that you have pre-validation from Puro, so then it helps your buyers to actually get confident that they can buy those things from us, and then we help them in putting the information package in a way that's easy for them to make decision. We talk to them quite regularly, so that's something that brings value to them and facilitate due diligence as well. It's tackling several things at the same time. So with the buyers, but also for the investors, now that they see that you have commercial tractions, they're ready to open the wallet and invest and come with you in your journey of scaling. So we help also with the funding, securing the revenue, so future CO2 removal certificate purchase, but also, the funding part. So how do we do it? This pre-validation is something that has been proven to have value when you're in a design phase. It gives confidence to buyers for them to commit for long term. It's a bit like a marriage, and we basically facilitate all of the information that you need to make such commitments. and those can then issue the pre-corks. Pre-corks can accelerate the cash flow and then scale up the operations. The de-risking for the investors and the buyers, because of those prepayments coming, because of the secured cash flow. Also, we happen to be owned by NASDAQ, so we're privately owned and proud of it because it aligns interest to get our operation to be efficient, because there is much more to gain for the producers and for us at the same time. And well, they put a lot of resources for us, so it is a way to de-risk in the value chain, to have a strong owner backing these operations. And then the insurance that's coming this year for Biochar that we developed together with an insurance company called Kita. And then we have a climate advisory services, so we help projects match the right type of investor. So say we have 200 projects developers in the pipeline, about 100 climate investors. Everybody's at different stages. Everybody has different criteria. We help you save time. Instead of talking to hundreds of investors, we'll present you the top 3 that are the most relevant for you. And yeah, this is something that we're proud to offer to our suppliers. We've developed together with NASDAQ a cork index to try to build all of the tools that's needed to create this new commodity. Carbon removal will become a commodity. It's on the beginning of its journey, and having an index where you could sign contracts where part of that, those future carbon removal certificates will be at a fixed price, but some could also be indexed to the market price. So to summarize, Puro is a carbon crediting company with services. We offer all of the tools, so we should not be deciding for you what you need, but we put out there all of the tools for you to make the business decision that you need to scale your business. And some tools may not be good for you now, some good for later, but we create everything that we hope is needed for you to run your business. And so the Puro standard I mentioned, but the business model is important for us, that we really try to lift all of the heavy costs that is typically upfront, and start making money only when you start making money. Then we've launched the pre-cork as digital assets, the funding solutions to help raise money and secure the future revenues, and the integrity that we have to do only engineered carbon removal helps you maximize the price you can get from your corks, because it's not diluted with other type of certificates that may be of a different quality. So typically, our suppliers are happy with the price that they manage to sell with our cork certification. And the biochar can sell, it's important to know, they can sell it either with us directly to your buyers that you're talking to our friends Carbonfuture, or to South Pole. If they sell it for us, we charge the same. We charge for the registry. So yeah, we hope that we bring the integrity and the flexibility that you need, and all of the services and tools that help you grow the business. Thank you.
So I think my jet lag must be kicking in. I completely forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kathleen DRAPER. I've been in the biochar industry 11 or 12 years now. I wear a number of different hats. Today, I'm here representing the International Biochar Initiative. I'm the board chair for the last several years. We have a booth here this year. And I also want to give a shout out to Paul Stewart, who organizes Bio360. He attended one of the study tours that I used to organize and hope to organize in the future in Helsinki, probably 3 or 4 years ago, pre-COVID. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, how do we get biochar at Bio360? And since then, it's grown every year that they've been able to host it. And this year, it's amazing how many people from the biochar industry are here. So again, thanks to Bio360. And apologies, 3 years ago, when we 4 years ago, when we were in Helsinki. Puro was one of our sponsors and hosts for the Biochar study tour. And at that time, I'm pretty sure they didn't use the term carbon crediting company. It's just amazing to see how fast this industry and the whole ecosystem around carbon removal markets has changed, and it's really, really hard to keep up with. So I've taken note, and I won't make that mistake again. Yeah, just to say that biochar is really evolving in the end uses as well. And so we have some people tomorrow that will be talking about non-agricultural uses. And that's when I'm not wearing my IBI hat, where I tend to play. And I think there's huge opportunities with putting biochar in things like concrete and asphalt. So if you're interested in that, and it's being accepted as a carbon removal credit opportunity, which I'm happy to see. So next up, we have Berta MOYA from Carbonfuture. And Berta's one of those that's been around in the biochar world and for a long time. So it's really, really good to see her moving into the removal space.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Berta from Carbonfuture. And today I'm going to be giving you like a brief overview of the carbon removal market, the dynamics that we're seeing. At Carbonfuture, I'm part of the carbon removal sourcing team, so speaking a lot with biochar producers and seeing what the trends and challenges are there. So I'm going to be introducing Carbonfuture briefly and also speaking about what we see from biochar producers, and also at the other end, what buyers of carbon removal credits are asking for. So first, Carbonfuture, what we are, what we do. So we're an end-to-end platform and also give a tracking solution for carbon removals in the aim of generating credits that are fully transparent and so build trust in this nascent carbon removal space. So what I mean by end-to-end platform, this is basically we interact with all the players along the chain. So from the biochar producers, we also interact with the end users, so whoever is actually applying or using the biochar. We also interact with the auditors, so the independent standards and verification bodies. And then at the other end as well, we can interact with, we're a marketplace, but we also can interact with other marketplaces, and we also deal with buyers of these credits. So this gives us a nice overview of the general market, and this is what I'm going to try and summarize in this presentation. So yeah, maybe some quick numbers about Carbonfuture. Carbonfuture started trading carbon removal credits in 2021, and we've been rapidly scaling and growing since. So last year we secured over 30,000 tons of CO2 equivalent removals. This year we're planning on growing even more and securing or beginning to work with other removal approaches as well, with the aim by 2024 to reach megatons. And yeah, we have been selling credits to the main big buyers, like the main suspects in the sector so far. This is an example of buyers that we have long-term offtake agreements with. And yeah, so maybe to give a overview of the carbon removal market, where it's at and what the trends are. This data is from a great website, cdr.fyi, that actually compiles all public data available on carbon removals that have been transacted or bought so far. As you can see, the market growth is massive and it's growing very rapidly year on year. So on all the green charts are about purchases, so carbon removal purchases, the volumes, and what methods have actually been purchased from. As you can see, yeah, there's the market like triples every year so far. I mean, it's still very small compared to what is needed for significant climate action, but it's a start. We definitely need more of it. In terms of purchases, you can see there's many different technologies being purchased from. This is so far mainly pre-purchases. So especially when we speak about direct air capture, so far enhanced weathering as well. Biochar has a big chunk, but then if you actually look on the green side, on the blue side, the actual deliveries so far of carbon removals, obviously also growing significantly. The numbers, however, are much lower. And if we look at what technologies have actually delivered so far, generated credits that can be traded today, 90% of it is biochar. So that's why today biochar is the most relevant carbon removal approach that is, as you probably heard before, like shovel ready and ready to scale. And I've personally been in the biochar space for the last 5 years, I think now, and definitely the fact that carbon removal credits can now be traded with biochar has really changed the sector quite significantly, which is good to see, seeing scale and grow. So now I will give you a brief overview of what we see in terms of trends and bottlenecks of biochar producers, the main things that we see that they face. So like I mentioned, biochar is now really scaling worldwide. We see that production volumes, even year on year, are significantly growing as well. When we were speaking a year or two ago to producers, the production volumes were in the hundreds or maybe the thousands. Now we have quite big projects that come with, tens of thousands of biochar per year, or even hundreds. Yeah, sometimes scary numbers, but big numbers, which is good to see. At Carbonfuture, we work with biochar producers in over 15 countries. There's little green dots that you can see there. And so far we have also, on this chart you can see like the contracted tons or the delivered tons that we have through Carbonfuture. So we have about 80,000 tons contracted, and at the end of last year, there were about 20,000 tons delivered. Now to the bottlenecks that we see. One of the key bottlenecks that we still see, and it's great to see that the number of booths of pyrolysis equipment manufacturers is also growing year on year here. But the access to pyrolysis technology is still one of the main challenges. Also, many buyers have confusions over standards, because at the moment there's 3 different standards for biochar. So biochar producers kind of struggle to navigate that space, and understandably somehow get confused between one and the others. Project financing, like Arnaud mentioned, is also a key bottleneck that we are all figuring out different ways of how we can help there as well. And also we see, and maybe this I will explain in my next slide, sometimes with biochar producers, they sell biochar and they just want to sell biochar and find someone who is interested in biochar. But then different biochars have different properties, and often the end customer that you're targeting sometimes doesn't know about biochar, or sometimes has very specific demands or specific requirements for a certain product. So it would be great to see a bit more what I'm calling here product thinking, like really thinking more about the market, what your product can offer, who you're offering it to, and speaking the language of that end customer. And I think sometimes as an industry we struggle a bit in like focusing our message, because yes, biochar can be great for many different things, but to someone who doesn't know about biochar, and I remember having that when I first started hearing about biochar, I was like, but what is it? Like, it's good for this, it's good for that, it's good for that, so what is it actually good for? So kind of targeting the message there is something that we see. now an outlook for a future, like Kathleen mentioned, the end uses of biochar beyond agriculture are also growing. This is a picture of a block of concrete made with biochar. We see that there's a lot of interest in that space as well. So far, it's not so big, as far as I know, and regulations tend to be a bit of a limitation at this point. And at least in Europe, so far, people are getting away with like loopholes to a certain extent. Like biochar can be considered a pigmentation, so you can use biochar in your cement mix as a pigment, but it's the policy and regulations need to catch up and include biochar in there. We're also seeing new methodologies coming up that open up new areas for carbon removal credits that will help scale as well. So, for instance, there's a new artisan standard that enables small-scale farmers that produce biochar in artisanal ways, like contikis or pits, to actually generate carbon removal credits. So this, for like low and middle income countries, is going to have quite a significant impact, we think, and help the market grow there. And then we also see in cases where biochar solves like waste management challenges, that there will be big scaling there in like very more like specific areas, maybe like biosolids. That was the talk before, where pyrolysis can solve that challenge, and so we see a lot of interest growing there as well. Maybe looking now quickly on the buyers. Not sure how I'm doing with time, but yeah. So quickly looking at the buyers, what they want, what they're looking for, and maybe what their fears are, because they're quite fearful from what our conversations with them. But first of all, who are they? So far, there's only a few. I mean, compared to offset credits, like the number of buyers for carbon removals is still very low. Most of them are currently, well, they are companies that have net zero targets. Many of them have signed up to the Science Based Target Initiative pledges, so where they need to reduce their emissions to a maximum and then compensate the residuals, like Arnaud mentioned as well, with carbon removal credits. But often those targets are only in like 10 or 20 years. So at the moment, many buyers are kind of testing the water, seeing who's out there, what type of credits they are, and seeing what they can get. So there is not a huge sense of urgency. But having said that, there are like more and more buyers who are interested in carbon removals specifically. Most of the companies are in North America and Europe so far. And yeah, like I mentioned, there's usually one-off purchases of a few hundred tons. They're not like big purchases, but we're also seeing a change in that of companies who actually want to secure their offset or their removal credits for the future. And we also are seeing new initiatives like Frontier Climate or the X Prize, who are initiatives that help boost the CDR market growth by giving the X Prize, for instance, it's a prize, so like cash money to really get the industry moving and growing. So what do buyers want? Like I said, many of them are a bit fearful. They definitely are worried about the reputation, their reputation of credits, like if they're buying credits that are not delivering on what their claims are. They are worried about, trust is a top priority for them. They want credits that they can really trust, and they sometimes have like quite intense scrutiny so far of the credits. Like they have their own due diligence teams even that really look into projects, and they so far are kind of looking into quite a bit into detail in things because of this reputational risk that is linked. We are also seeing pricing because offset credits are much cheaper. Buyers often take a portfolio approach, so they buy carbon removals and offsets and take more of a portfolio approach. And in terms of project location, so far the conversations we've had as well, we see that companies like having credits close to home, like either close to their headquarters or close to their value chain, their production chain. And where we see things going forward for the carbon removal market, like I mentioned, there's stable growth year on year, but we need even more acceleration. The demand is growing as more and more companies are setting net zero pledges. We also see that the actual cost of doing carbon removal is going to come down as technologies develop and scale. And what is going to be really key in this space is where policy goes, like how policy is developed. Because currently carbon removals are only in the voluntary market. And if they start being in the regulated market, things will also change for everyone here. And now going back to Carbonfuture and what we offer, like I said, trust is like one of the key challenges for buyers. And they really want to have credits that they can, they can see all the information and fully transparent and traceable. So this is what our Carbonfuture we aim to address through our platform, where we offer like the digital monitoring, reporting, and verification (MRV), which is a big topic in the carbon removal space at the moment. How to provide MRV that is lean and not, administratively cumbersome, but at the same time offers this full transparency and auditability at all points. And this is what our platform, is a digital platform, offers. So we interact with all the key players in the ecosystem. So you see the validation and verification bodies and the standards, like we interact with all of them. So meaning that a supplier can work with different standards or use different methodologies. We can take the data that is needed for that specific methodology, have it on the Carbonfuture platform available for these verification bodies to audit and look at. And once they give the green light that all the data is correct, they approve it, then a carbon removal credit is generated, which can then be sold to companies looking to buy carbon removal credits, and that can be through our own marketplace or other marketplaces as well. So this is what we offer, and maybe just going forward. So like I said, so far we're very much focused on biochar because it's the main removal technology that has methodologies developed and owned by third-party, registered in third-party standards and registries. And we see that the next technologies will probably be enhanced weathering. Recycled concrete is also a big area that is growing. And then ocean carbon removal has a big potential, but it's still the many open questions in terms of the science. And then in the further future, like direct air capture, I mean, that's more like when the technologies will be ready for scaling and large, larger projects coming live there. And that was the overview. I know I covered a lot of things, but hope that was helpful.
So I'm glad you ended with that slide about permanent carbon removal, because permanence has been a big topic in the removal marketplaces. And there's somewhat of a misunderstanding or misperception of the permanence of biochar. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, it's under 100 years. And then you'll hear a lot of us say, well, it's more than 1,000 years. And there was a really good article published by my colleague Hans-Peter Schmidt and several others late last year on permanence, and it really goes into the subtleties of what they call labile portion of biochar versus the recalcitrant. And IBI is hosting a webinar on this topic February 16th, I think. You'll find it on our website. And it really goes into a deep dive, really to educate the carbon removal buyers about what permanence means when you're talking about biochar. So It's a big topic. One thing I wanted to highlight from your the blue chart from that report on CDR, the delivered amount, it said 87% of it, the delivered removals, was from biochar, but it also said 9% was from bio oil. What they didn't really clarify is that that bio oil is being generated by pyrolysis. So when you add those two together, that's what we call pyrolysis with carbon capture and storage, or PICS. We contribute 96% of the delivered removals last year. It's pretty exciting to be in the biochar industry, but I am biased. For maybe our last speaker, although we might have a surprise speaker after this, I have invited Hannes ETTER from South Pole. He is the Deputy Director of Biochar Strategies.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yes, and also thanks for pointing that complicated title. Yes, so I have the honor of being the last of the three announced speakers, and I'm taking the role of South Pole here and presenting South Pole and the biochar strategy that South Pole as a project developer have. So it's really nice to have those two previous speakers here who are focusing on the standard and the marketplace, and South Pole as a project developer sees itself somewhere as an intermediary here. Just briefly on South Pole itself, as I mentioned, we are a carbon asset and carbon management business, which basically means that our idea is that we want to create impact while also creating profits for everyone involved. The infamous or famous triple win bottom line that we all look for. And basically, you can see here that this is the previous impact that South Pole has generated. And the question is, how do we generate these impacts? What we usually do is we look at project opportunities and activities that are implemented and try to convert them to investable and financiable assets. And in this case, we're talking about carbon assets. So basically what we do, we want to make sure that the activities which generate positive impacts on the environment, on the social side, can actually be invested in and financed. And this is our position. We work with the project providers, such as you as biochar producers, and then we also work with the buyers. So basically, we advise companies on their road to net zero, to become climate neutral or climate positive, and provide them, besides advisory services on how to decarbonize their activities, with carbon credits to compensate for the unavoidable parts. So basically, we're working along the value chain of carbon credits, the generation, the management, and then also the sales through existing marketplaces as well. And I thought, as a project developer, what we do and what we understand is carbon standards, and is basically the development and management of carbon assets. And I thought it would be wise to spend a bit of time on figuring out what is actually the way from the produced biochar towards a carbon credit that can be traded as a good and services. And this is basically the life cycle of a carbon project. Basically, it all starts right up there at the dark blue corner, where you have activities that protect the climate by either removing or avoiding greenhouse gases. And basically what we need to do is figuring out that we can how we can certify these under existing standards. The gold standard, Verra, but there are also standards such as the C-Sync certificate or Puro, which all give guidance and regulations on how climate activities need actually to be conducted to form a credible carbon assets. And so I think we've all recently seen a lot of discussions about carbon markets. Is it valid or not? And I think this is where the carbon standards and the respective methodologies play a vital role to ensure that the climate activities are actually credible, durable, and reliable. So basically, then our next step is, as South Pole, as a project developer, together with the project partners, look at the activities that are being implemented. How is the biochar produced? What kind of feedstocks are being used? Are there any negative consequences? And make sure that the activities are actually credible and comply with the requirement that the standards give. Once we have identified this, we make sure, okay, that we demonstrate that those comply with it, which means that South Pole, as a project developer, drafts and develops the project according to the standards, which means we have to generate project design documents. We have to document that the activities are thoroughly implemented and then subsequently, and this is where coming into the yellow part here, and sorry, still in the light blue one, work with third-party auditors that review those documents. So basically, you as a biochar producer need to submit documents on how your facility is operating, what kind of feedstocks you're operating with, and we need to provide them to a third-party auditor that can provide that rigorous and thorough review to make sure that we can have a credible statement that the climate impacts are actually legit and that we're not creating a lot of those discussions that has been emerging in the past. So once we've succeeded that, so basically on the one hand, we have created a project design document that demonstrates how this works. We have the third party coming in, such as Carbon Sense International, for example, that come in and approve that the activities are actually credible. We finally have a carbon asset in our hand that because we have the demonstration that the carbon has been thoroughly stored, removed, and we can credify it. And that yields us basically with 1 carbon credit, which relates to 1 ton of carbon removed. And I think in an important point where we have marketplaces coming in is basically in the question on how can we get those credits to the market. And I think this is a part where we need to carefully also understand what are companies looking for and how can we move those credits from the registry to the buyers and then actually retire them. And I think this is a part where we've already seen now a lot of discussions, so I don't need to go into full details on the value of the credits. You've seen those points from our colleagues from Puro before. At the moment, we see that in terms of carbon credits, we have 2 major credit types on the markets. We have the C-Sync certificate on the market, and we have the PuroEarth corks on the market. At the moment, and apologies if these have been probably presented in an updated version from my colleague from Puro, because this is where we got part of those figures from. We've seen that there has been quite some movement in the market. Also, the prices are ramping up increasingly, and basically the ask prices from the biochar producers that we see are somewhere between 100 and 500 euros per cork. So I think there's still ample of room for the market to mature into, so we get a more streamlined pricing point. An important point is that we've spoken about the question of the standards. Now we have the new standard coming in from Berta, which has recently been announced, which is, and we come into this a bit later, working on a different system, or it has been approved by another party as a standard. And we see that under this Berta standard, no credits have been issued so far, and we expect credits to be coming in for 2025. We work, for example, with Carbonfuture together. And then we believe that this might also cause some new signals into the market. Overall, the aim is for everyone to scale the markets, and I think we're going to get there quite soon. Key point here, what we think as a carbon developer and also subsequent seller of carbon credits is that we need to align the standards question. And I think we have this point raised by the colleague from Carbonfuture before. Also, the colleague from Puro has mentioned that before. At the moment, we have 3 standards in the market, which are more or less looking at the same thing, but also from different sites. And what we think is quite important to make sure that we have a bit more clarity on the carbon market, on kind of methodologies, and also the kind of credits that we're generating. As South Pole, we are a project developer. That means we can operate with different standards, but we feel, and we see also from the buyer side, so the people that come to us, that we work with, that would like to buy credits from us, that there's also on the buyer side a bit of confusion, which is why we took a decision to say we would like to work with credits that have been approved by a third-party body. And that is, in this case, the ICROA body, which is the International Coalition for Reduction... for Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance. You can see it's a terrible acronym. People love acronyms in this space. And ICROA is kind of a standard for standards. So you can think about it as a standard. Puro, for example, is in the process of doing so. You apply for ICROA for a green light. And ICROA makes sure that your standards complies with the requirements that carbon standards generally should have, which is something that we perceive from our buyers that are engaging in a net zero journey as a highly important aspect, because it ensures them that the credit has been generated through a standard that has credibility in the market. So basically, as a carbon developer, South Pole is quite is is strongly committed to an ACROA standard, which means that we mostly work with standards and credits which are green lighted by that. So basically, this is why I keep on emphasizing the point that the Verra standard, which is ACROA endorsed, will also provide some changes, as well as a potential ACROA endorsement from the Puro standard. Besides that point on the market confusion or uncertainty regarding carbon standards, we see some other points when we talk to potential carbon project partners, such as biochar producers. So on the one hand, especially in Europe, we have an ongoing discussion about the feedstocks and the availability of feedstocks without constraining other activities, which would also have negative carbon consequences. And also the discussion about where does the biochar go and how can we thoroughly document the end use. I think this is a key requirement which is existing for Carbonfuture and also for the Verra standard, which still puts a lot of headache in, which I think we're getting more and more solutions in, but it's still a work in progress. Also, some uncertainty is still existing in the terms of the absorption capacities from the buyers of carbon. We have different types of biochar. We have different application systems for biochar. So the question is basically, how can we project reliable offtake numbers, which also determine the removal credits that would be generated. And for us as a carbon developer, we see that this uncertainty also puts a bit of risk on the carbon asset potential that the respective suppliers for carbon credits would bring. But coming back to the question of what does actually carbon development mean and how do we get from a carbon activity or a carbon removal activity to a carbon credit asset. What South Pole is actually offering are 3 different points. On the one hand, we try to work with you to develop your facility as a carbon asset production system. So basically, how can we get from a biochar facility, how can we register it, how can we develop it so it can yield credible carbon credits, which is here our carbon asset development point. Once we have registered said facility under, be it Verra, being the Puro standard, now the question is, how can we make sure that it will continue to create carbon removal credits? And this is where our management service offering comes into play. So basically, we work with you to make sure that the production documentation that you provide, also the end user application data, can be taken up with service providers such as Carbonfuture, where we have a collaboration with, but make sure that the documentation that you provide on a recurring basis complies with the requirements that the standards bring. Because often this is a part that is overlooked in the development of carbon credits. It's not trivial. It comes with a lot of challenges. And basically, this is where South Pole tries to help you. Besides also addressing the infamous challenge of financing. So I think Puro has a very nice solution with the pre-corks, which is a good way. South Pole also, from the different buyers of carbon credits that we have at hand, offers further carbon financing solutions such as upfront finance, commitments to offtake agreements, and other solutions which can help you to bridge the financing gaps that might arise from the high investment costs that you might have from investing in pyrolysis units. Generally, we prefer to work this out in a partnership agreement, which goes beyond just buying credits from you. But basically, as we mentioned, we would like to position ourselves as a service provider that goes hand in hand with you for a longer period. Our role here basically is to work with you in a partnership that ensures that everyone involved profits from the biochar that is produced. At the end of the day, that means that we only profit if you produce a carbon credit, and you only profit if we are also in the same boat with you and we are able to sell the credits. So we have a mutually aligned interest. On the one hand, that means that you as a biochar producer, what you need to do is what you probably know best is produce biochar, sell the biochar to your end clients. And in return, what we need to do is we need to make sure that the data that you provide to us is being thoroughly reviewed and is created or developed in a way that can be taken up by the carbon standards to create a carbon credit. You, as a provider of those credits, get a major share of the revenues that South Pole, as your commercialization partner, would get in the market. So we sell the credits on your behalf to our end clients, which like to decarbonize their activities. and you as a partner here get a major share without actually investing in your carbon asset development. So South Pole will do this at a no-cost service for you, while we get an exclusive right to the carbon asset as a sales channel for you, and profit a bit from the through a commission model by selling your carbon credits. So basically, the more you scale in terms of your operation and the more credits we can sell, the more each and every one profits on the whole value chain. An example for this is one of our projects that we are operating in Switzerland, which is called Carbon. We have set this this project up with a partner in Switzerland, which is one of the larger opportunities or clients now that's operating in Switzerland. They are working with under the Verra standard, so we are registering them. We're also working with Carbonfuture on this as our monitoring partner here. And basically in this profitable situation, we have the opportunity to work with a company that's operating in the forestry space, which are sourcing their own bioresidues and bio-waste from their forestry operations, convert them to biochar, sell them within Switzerland. And our role here is then to make sure that the data they provide, the setup of their, which for example is the setup of their facility, which is also the sales documentation, etc., can be then sent to Verra, which will issue the carbon credits to us, and subsequently we can sell it. So basically here we have a good opportunity for set win-win situation for the producer and the buyers, while also creating multiple co-benefits. But I don't think I need to tell you. I think we've heard enough of those already today. That's my perspective here from a carbon project developer perspective. And I'm happy to close my presentation here and hand it over to Kathleen again. Thanks.
So I am going to invite one other person to come up. But before we do that, I thought I would just ask, how many people here are actually selling biochar-based carbon removal credits? Anybody? All right. At least 3, 4. And how many, if any, are already purchasing biochar-based credits or are interested in buying them? Oh, look, guys, you need to meet up with each other after this. Good. So I did ask the folks from Carbon Standards International if they would like to have a word. They don't have a formal presentation, but I do believe it's an industry player that I think it's important to acknowledge. Oh, so there you are. So Julia Winters, who is the operational manager of Biochar, will be talking for a few minutes, and then we'll get to Q&A.
Okay, a warm welcome from my side. My name is Julia Winter. As Kathleen said, I'm the operational manager of Biochar at Carbon Standards International. Yeah, there was a little misunderstanding, so we have just created a small presentation for you. I hope that it will work. Yes, perfect. Thank you very much on the guys on the technique. Is it this one? Okay, I will try. So our company, yes, Carbon Standards International, we are located in Switzerland. We have a team, 1 second, oh, sorry. Yeah, the big one. Okay, we have a team of 15 people, and we are developing standards and IT systems for carbon removals and carbon. At the moment, we have 5 standards published. One of the most famous standard, oh, 1 second, I've missed. Here, it's the European Biochar Certificate Standard. With this standard, we have defined requirements where you have a high quality of your biochar. So the basis are analytical parameters, which are based on the European regulation. So with the EBC logo on your biochar, you have improved that you have a biochar which you can use in the agricultural sector for application into the soil, but also for feed. And also in the industry for different materials like concrete and asphalt. Then when you have produced your biochar, you can create a carbon sink out of your biochar. So we have a second standard the global ceasing standard. It's like the framework of all our ceasing standards. I will talk a little bit later about this. And the EBC ceasing standard is under this global ceasing standard. So in this EBC ceasing standard, we define the requirements for the calculation of the ceasing and the ceasing potential. So we calculate all your emissions on your production side, with the transportation of your biomass, all the emissions and electricity consumption on your pyrolysis unit. And then you will have a ceasing potential, which you can sell then on the market. And our system is like this, that we work together with EBC accredited trader, which Carbonfuture is, for example. So you can sell your ceasing potential to them, and then they will sell the CO2 credits on the market, or you can use their tracking system to track your biochar and your ceasing potential, and then you can sell your CO2 credits on the market on your own. But the EBC certificate for your biochar and the ceasing potential certificate is also accepted for other market players like Puro and Vera. So you can, but they then use their own methodology to calculate the ceasing and the CO2 certificates. Another standard which we have is the artisan ceasing standard. So here we offer also a methodology for calculating the ceasing, but this is in countries with a lower and middle income countries. So here we have a low technology. It's different to the to the EBC, because in the EBC we have a high technology, where you see here a few providers also here in the expo. And with the artisan, we have farmers who produce the biochar in a kiln, in a contiki, and they avoid emissions by burning the biomass on the fields. And this we take into account for our ceasing calculation. And then you will also get a certification from our partner BioInspector. And then you can also sell these credits on the market. All our ceasings, which are certified according to our standards, are then registered in our registry. So you find all the ceasings here. We create portfolios, or the ceasing traders create portfolios then, and then all the ceasing credits requirements are also in our registry. So this is really the proof that the whole certification system was done, that we have an proof that the biochar is really applied to his final storage place, and all these things you find then in the registry. We work together with a lot of partners, and we are very proud and we are very happy to collaborate with them. Though, yes, you may know a few. They are also here on the expo today. The ETTER Institute, you may know also. It's a scientific and a scientific organization also based in Switzerland, and they are on our scientific board. So they help us to develop the standards further, so that they are always in line with the up-to-date scientific studies, and also practical on the market, so that you can really use them in your daily business. The other one, thank you, are like market partner who supports us to bring the EBC label and the global ceasing label on the market. And so they know all about the inspection and certification of our standards. So you can also contact them. And FIBEL is also a scientific organization in Switzerland, which are based on the pharma level, though we work together to define also requirements on the agricultural sector. Yeah, so we have a booth here, so we are very happy when you visit us, so we can discuss a few other points. And yeah, sorry for the very short presentation, but yeah, also I was very happy to present Carbon Standards International here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. And she was very gracious. It was really my fault that I hadn't organized having someone from Carbon Standards International ahead of time. So my apologies. Before we move on to that, I mean, just for some historical background, in 2019, I don't think there was a biochar standard. We now have a growing number. This year, we'll see a few more. One is coming out for the US and Canada under the Climate Action Reserve. I just heard from two other people. One is developing one for forestry in the US. So I think we're just at the very, very beginning of this industry. And as I said earlier, it's head spinning to try to keep up with it. One thing I do want to push a little bit is that IBI is developing the first, what we're calling Biochar Academy. We will have one full day about carbon markets because it's impossible to go very far with just an hour and a half. If anybody's interested, it's actually a 2-week course at the end of last 2 weeks in June in upstate New York. And the purpose of this is that we're getting so many new people coming into the biochar industry that have never heard of it before they're hired, and we're trying to create some sort of workforce development education for these folks. And if you can't make it to upstate New York, my hometown, then we will be turning these into e-learning modules later in the year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. I'm guessing there might be a few, but it is lunchtime. Okay, somebody's going to bring a mic to you. And if there's somebody specific you're gearing it towards, just let us know.
Hello everyone. I'm from the company Hafner Energy. We are interested into biochar. I have a question for all of you. At European level, you have this proposal from the Commission concerning the carbon removal certification. So far, the technologies which have been identified are the BECS, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, and direct air capture. There is no biochar mentioned as such into this carbon removal certification. So what, according to you, are the barriers so that the biochar can have its place into this certification?
Maybe I'll have a go, and then please feel free to add. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and we are definitely seeing that. And industry groups like the EBI is doing a great job at representing biochar in these discussions. And same with, like, there's a negative emissions platform that biochar is also quite present in, and we are definitely pushing for biochar to be included there. I mean, the reason why biochar isn't so prominent there, I think, is linked to what Kathleen was saying of the perception of biochar sometimes that's not being permanent. Also the fact that it's a nature-based solution. Sometimes it's put together with afforestation or reforestation or other land-based approaches. And so I think that's why it's kind of a lack of awareness from policymakers on biochar. But like I said, like, industry groups are really pushing there to be present in these conversations and make sure that biochar and pyrogenic carbon capture and storage are included. So it is being addressed and thought about, at least.
Yeah, and I don't know if you follow a little bit on LinkedIn, but there's been a few kind of lobbyists being hired by almost everyone here in the on the panel. So I think it's up to all of the stakeholders to actually take a stand and mobilize a bit, impactful relations to contribute a little bit to the development that's needed to recognize biochar as a proper carbon removal also by the EU. And I think it's going to get there. Once well informed, I don't see why not. But that's a personal view.
So yes, we have also the information that EBI gets the open ears on this. So we are sure that it will come. But as you said, Berta, it's a lack of knowledge, but it's now on the market, and it's very important to have it in it.
I think all of us are somehow involved in this. Some of us a bit more there's a dedicated working group within EBI to position biochar under the European carbon removal framework. And we're looking at different aspects which might be a bit problematic and which are perceived as problematic from the member states representatives in the commission. But I think basically we are also South was part of this working group. There's 10, 12 organizations in said working group. And I think if you're interested to contribute and lobby and help to lobby this, I think it's a good point to go to Harald Beer and reach out so he can make sure that you can a bit more prominent in that position in that working group.
All right. What other questions are there?
Thanks. I guess outside of the EU market, where it might come under the compliance regime, do any of you see any threat in the longer term to the additionality of voluntary carbon credits for biochar if a market appears for the physical biochar, which can pay enough that you don't actually need the carbon financing to make your project worthwhile?
Well, that's my favorite topic, additionality.
All right.
So I'll try to not be too personal about my own opinion because I'm also representing Puro, but I'll start with my personal opinion. Forgive me about that. I come from the impact world where, you can actually, in a quite quantifying way, measure impacts. And perhaps the real question is about maximizing the impact of each euro spent rather than ticking a box, additional yes, no. Then when you look at the scale that is needed compared to the current scale, of course, if you want to scale a new generation of technology that will enable that scale, it needs to come from commercially viable projects that have a diversified source of cash flow. And this is a big impact because it has a demonstration concept. So you need to start from that and then build on it so that then you can roll out the technology. Now, of course, there would be problems if there would be absolutely no demonstration impact of already up and running business. But in the case of biochar, you need to invest in gas controls. You need to invest in plenty of things so that you meet the standards. So without the standards and the carbon credits, nothing would happen. So you could almost argue that all biochar projects are one way or another additional. Now, it is something that needs to be understood, like on the market level. And it's a concept that comes from nature-based that is being applied now on the engineered. So I see the outlook is that it will be adapted to engineered and innovation technology. So you have the demonstration concept that is very important for the technology-based. That is not the case for nature-based. So I think it will be a concept that will be adapted with time as people understand it better.
And happy to confirm that. I think saying once we reach a point in terms of maturity of the technology where we don't need carbon credits anymore to operate the biochar production, I think that's our dream point. And I think this is where we actually need to get to and then actually seize carbon investments, because I think we all can agree in order to reach the 1.5 world, we need carbon investments, but we need to make sure that we use those investments wisely to where it's necessary. And I think, look at renewable energy transformation. We have had a nascent technology that has been scaled where it's now profitable. And I think now that would be the time to divest from that and look where we can make the largest impact with this. And I think probably my CEO would not be happy with that statement in the long run on carbon credits from biochar, but I think this is where we need to go to make sure that we invest into carbon credits from biochar as long as it's required, and then make sure we go to somewhere else. And I think every one of us is more or less hopefully impact driven still, and wants to make sure that we find that point and then make sure we jump to the next technology.
And I would just like to add to that I think there are already, and there's going to be a growing number of situations where people are not going to sell the carbon credits. They're going to keep it themselves. I have this situation already with a company I connected, a producer with a biochar buyer that's using it in some sort of interior building material, and they can't sell the credits because if they do, then the company that's putting this in their material cannot make the claim that it's lower embodied carbon. And I think we're going to start seeing that a lot more very soon. So any other questions? We have a hungry audience.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I work for a company called A Healthier Earth, and I'm curious about clarification in the methodology around the use of purpose-grown feedstock. The methodology references the European Biochar certificate positive list of feedstocks, and they allude to purpose-grown, but it's not clear whether that's accepted or not.
That's a hot topic. Who wants to take that? And there's varying answers from what I know.
I think I'm not the scientist of the team here, so I'll try to give as clear answer as possible. I think from the philosophy of the Puro methodology is to have the flexibility for pragmatism of getting the biochar going, but taking into account the science. So basically, purpose grown is something that needs a little bit more ticking the boxes. But it is something possible that you kind of justify the way you do it and integrate in a way that basically makes sense. Common sense is a kind of what we try to apply. If there are differences in the life cycle assessments, it is going to be taken into account as a net negativity conversion. But the idea is really to allow for biochar business to be able to operate with the level of flexibility that's needed, as long as it keeps the integrity that makes the standard good. But for us, we welcome this in general.
Okay, for EBC, we have a positive list with the biomass. So this is scientific based. So we allow this biomass which is sustainable. It's a base requirement of the EBC standard, and also for the ceasing standard. So you need to use sustainable feedstock, which is on this list. But we, together with the ETTER Institute, we develop further this positive list, and it will come in a few weeks a new ones with sewage sludge on it. So we always try to adapt this positive list to have more possibilities of the biomass to make biochar out of it.
And since we spoke about confusion in the market and the different methodologies, I'd like to speak on behalf of Vera, because Salford has co-authored the Vera methodology. And we said that there are different levels of requirements. And one thing that was in the development for the Vera methodology, what we had to consider, because the standard requires this, is the concept of leakage. And where we saw that there are a lot of discussions or positive outside of the project effects, so to speak. So for example, if you take in feedstocks that are purposely grown in the past, which are used for some other activities, and you re-divert them to biochar, there might be some negative consequences, which you cannot consider in setting up the biochar project. So basically the Vera standard would need to account for that, and because this has some wider implementation or implications for the project itself, which made it much more complicated. As of now, the Vera standard says they wanted to have a robust and as robust as possible accounting, and said at the moment we rather keep it simple and just allow for waste biomass and exclude purpose-grown feedstock. There might be revisions coming up because I think every one of us is kind of interested to scale this, and scaling this, especially in Europe, will most likely draw back on purposely grown feedstock. There might be changes coming up, but this may complicate it. So we need to identify, has this purpose-grown, has growing the feedstock led to degradation or land use changes? How can we account for this? Do we need to put safeguards in place? So I think all of these points is something that the Verra standard would need you to consider, and it will come, but it will take some more time. And also it will take some more green lighting or complexities in approving said feedstocks from these fields. Very complex answer, sorry.
And Puro welcomes this, but it also means that we do a little bit more homework with purpose grown, because obviously it loses more lands. So you need to have your kind of stakeholder engagement pretty good, and way to justify that there are no negative impacts socially or locally and things like that. But yeah, something that we're happy to include as long as it makes sense again.
And I think it will be quite important to clear out this confusion, to make sure we bring all of these different methodologies together, so we're not cherry picking, okay, what's my situation, what kind of standards would I want to pick, but rather make sure that we all align them together. And I think this is basically where you have different people here on the panel, but I think all of us are more or less somehow collaborating already. And I think as the biochar space itself is maturing, also the alignment between the different organizations and the tools that we use will mature further.
Over dinner tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, that question has been kicking around the biochar world for a decade, if not more. And my standard go-to answer used to be the economics don't work, because especially when you're being paid to take waste, you can sell the biochar for nothing or give it away. So I used to say, if you're growing purpose-grown crops, that's a lot of upfront investment, and then your yield is a quarter of that. So you really had to make money, but the economics or the dynamics of carbon markets has really changed that. And what we're seeing now is, like somebody mentioned, you have to have a good market for biochar, and we're still trying to make those markets happen. And once we've done that, then I think it makes more sense to focus on these purpose-grown crops. But in the interim, let's figure out the markets for the waste so we can, make that work. But that's not the IBI answer. That's Kathleen's answer.
My name is Uli Grauert from Interholco. I have a question on pricing. I don't know whether it's for South Pole maybe. On biochar-based carbon removal credits, there's a certain price level. This is based on 100 years plus. What about 1,000 years plus? Is there a customer base being interested in this product? And can you say anything on the possible price level maybe?
All right. Yes, great question. And I think this is something that is making a lot of people internally at South Pole quite excited, and also provides a bit of headache, but headache also leads to more excitement. So I think that's good. Obviously, the major carbon standards at the moment that look at removals, Verra, Puro, CSync, I think as well, consider 100 years as permanence requirements, which is what basically the carbon accounting world figures out. Now we see that biochar actually can yield, and we're going to learn about this more from Kathleen's webinar. Will yield a longer removal, and I think we now see a lot of companies also that are interested in long-term investments, going for longer permanence requirements. And we have a few buyers already now that say, okay, can you demonstrate to us that there's a permanence of 800 to 1,000 years? We're happy to either buy the credits at a premium or provide upfront finance, long-term engagement. So I think there is interest from selected buyers, but the question is a bit, where are we now, and where can we scale towards? And I think in the long term, if we want to scale biochar, we need to make sure that it becomes a commodified asset that is a bit generalized, and which usually works via the stands for the 100 years permanence, which is the standard rules and regulations to what duration do you perceive. However, there will still be investors with more financing opportunities that would go beyond that, and they would come obviously because they pay a price premium. They feel entitled to do so by looking at more requirements. So I think biochar itself as a removal product could have an advantage from traditional removal technologies such as soil carbon or nature-based solutions within forest, because you have a much more durable carbon pool established.
Yeah, and maybe I would add as well that from what we see from buyers who are interested in carbon removal credits, in the carbon removal space in general, the conversation is very much moving towards the 1,000 years. So those buyers are not interested in 100 years, and that's why, as we mentioned before, like biochar is in this space now where we really need to be shifting the conversation towards, biochar, if it meets these specific criteria, will last over 1,000 years. And then buyers are interested in these credits. And also when they're looking at offsets and removals, a price point of like 100 or something between 100 or 200 euros is already quite significantly higher than offsets. So at least when we have conversations with buyers in like longer term offtake agreements, they are definitely pushing more towards the 100 euro mark, because it's already a premium there for them.
In the Puro methodology quantification, we ask for lab analysis where we ask for the carbon content of the biochar. Also, we take into account the temperature. So we're going quite into the detail of the modeling of how much will be left after 100 years. But we have exactly the same data for the 1,000 years. So it's, this is something that can be adjusted if need be. I think what makes sense, again, about making sense is to listen again to the demand. And so far, you have, there were some numbers up there, maybe 20 committed buyers really ready to open the wallet. Maybe a few are pushing for the 1,000, but still the majority of the buyers on board they are driving, the trend. So hard to say what will happen, but in any case, the science behind our methodology is ready to adapt.
So Arnaud, are you just looking at the biochar and the hydrogen to carbon ratio, or are you looking at the end use and how that might impact the longevity?
Everything, yes,
Okay.
those two. And these are tabled then that gives you the conversion factor from tons of biochar to tons of CO2 removed.
Yeah, perhaps now a few words from our side, EBC. So we have in our standard for the soil application also the 100 years. But there is, as you may know, a scientific paper already around from the ETTER Institute that when we have this ratio below 0.4, that we assume that the carbon in the biochar will stay longer, and we say 800 until 1,000 years. But it's also a question of how can you guarantee that it will be still there? And so it would be a question of the future generations that they will follow up our work now. So even me, I can't guarantee I will not work for 100 years. But yeah, so it's also a question of this, that we say, okay, it's not only ticking a box and say, okay, it's 1,000 years, but we have to follow up with this also in future generations.
So I'd like to pivot that question a little bit, and I always ask the DAX people this. Are buyers looking at co-benefits, or is permanence like the number one thing they're looking at these days?
I know, well, obviously, unfortunately, at the moment, we just have, in terms of environmental impacts, we have one metric that is very well established, that's tons of carbon. And I think that we have now, since a couple of years, in the climate world, a huge market, which is causing great excitement. And unfortunately, we just see a bit of emergence on biodiversity credits, and we see not much on any other sustainability impact. However, we see that especially for premium products and biochar credits, because of the price and because of the removal aspects, are still considered from our clients by our credits a premium product, just because the prices are up to 10 times more expensive for a ton of CO2 for biochar removals compared to forest carbon credits, for example. So there, obviously, if we want to sell a premium product, it needs to be a premium product. And that means that usually comes with a whole story about the co-benefits. And I think that, again, is something where biochar has a great impact. We've seen figures up here on the co-benefits on fertilizer avoidance, which can be quantified from a CO2 perspective. But we also see now increasing body of literature in biodiversity benefits, yield increases, also the social benefits, especially if you think about the artisanal production of biochar. I think the narrative behind the whole story is something that makes the whole product much more sexy compared to, I don't know, a water dam that can yield clean energy credits. So I think this is something we need to increasingly focus on, and I think we can go much further beyond just the removal credits. We have the avoidance credits, which come from the co-benefits, and we also have the less quantifiable but still qualitative impacts that play a major role in pitching these. And I think we all, in terms of commodifying the asset, can do much more to make this visible through SDG frameworks and quantification or qualifications of what other co-benefits are there out.
Do buyers look at the co-benefits? Definitely. Do all buyers look at it equally? Definitely not. And so it's our role also to understand what all of our buyers are, after. And there are not only the co-benefits, but plenty of other, not only permanence, but as mentioned by our colleague from Carbonfuture here, the value chain, the locations, and the same that Sospo were explaining here. There are a lot of qualitative criteria that are hard to correlate with the difference of prices. But in general, I have to say that it is well mapped, and it's also our role to crunch the information so that it's already displayed to the buyer, so that they can, the good projects that are attracted to them can jump into their eyes. So,
Anybody else?
I totally agree, and I think it's important also to point this out, the really positive aspects of biochar, because we need the application to create the seasons. And we remark that in the meantime, the sea-sink or the CO2 credits are important, but we have also projects where, and especially in the artisan standard, where the value of the biochar when we putting it into the soil is really very high. And I think it's important to make this marketing also, because we need the application to create the sea-sinks. So we need this added value of the biochar and to advertise it, that we can sell it on the market.
They used to call it charismatic carbon, I think, in the old phase.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I think with biochar, what is specific when speaking to buyers, sometimes it's a bit more complicated to get their heads around than direct air capture, where it's like you capture the CO2, you put it in the ground, and that's it. Whereas with biochar, and like I mentioned before, like biochar, buyers are really worried about their reputation. There's a lot of green hushing happening as well, where they might take action, but they're a bit sheepish about actually, marketing it and being, actually saying what they're doing. And so I think with biochar, the co-benefits definitely help with the marketing. There's a nice story behind it, but they also, biochar credits need to have this trust in them. So the traceability of the biochar, knowing where it was produced and where it ends up, is also really key, I think, to instill trust in the biochar space as well, and these credits with the co-benefits to make buyers understand the space and really put their money behind it as well.
Yeah. On one of my flights over here, I happened to sit next to a woman who was part of Delta Airlines sustainability. No surprise, she'd never heard of biochar. But once I went into my spiel, she was fascinated by it. So I think the first hurdle is they've never heard of it. And then when you can get into all these co-benefits, they get excited. But you got to have that opportunity. I think there's a question here, and then we'll go there. Krister.
Hello, thank you. Krister Soderberg from Circle Carbon. I had a question that has mostly been answered already through this most recent discussion. I came in a little late and might have been answered better before, but I want to ask, a year ago I was here, and I'm sure most people have heard of the sale of carbon at 564 euros per ton. which helped finance a large project in Finland. Won't say any names. But I would really like to understand what were the dynamics behind that, and if it is purely co-benefits or if it was some special arrangement. My understanding is that it was sold to Microsoft and Shopify, so these are serious players. That was one thing. The other thing is, of course, it's fantastic to see this development with carbon credits and corks and C-sinks, but there is, in my view, a possible risk that speculation might hurt the market and put an early end to it. I think a lot is being done, and it's really I'm very grateful to hear all of the good things that are happening to make it transparent and trustworthy. But I'd like to hear your opinion on what are the greatest risks against this trend continuing. One of the things that worries me personally is that biochar credits are being bought and invested in, and being considered to dump down mine shafts. And considering the co-benefits, I think that would be a terrible waste, since we not only have a climate change situation, we also have a food security situation. So
I'll argue that last one with you later, Krister, but
well, I guess I could give a start of an answer. So first of all, this deal that you mentioned, I mean, there's no secret, and we can totally refer to a webinar where actually the price and the details of the contracts are openly discussed. So let's catch up later. I can give you the link to that. So definitely projects have different approaches. Some want to really put emphasis on being a carbon credit company with a benefit as a biochar and all of the rest, which is a kind of a bonus. This way it's easier for them to justify additionality if we again take the approach of tick the box. And then some are more, they don't want to depend on carbon credits prices and the volatility. And the fact that it's an early stage market is easy to speculate, as you mentioned. And some really just look at their Excel and say how much it costs to produce biochar, and without relying on the carbon credits in the beginning, this is how much it costs. And if I need support from the buyers, this is the price it should take. So it's different strategy, different approaches. I think there's not a winning one. What perhaps I would say is, in general, there is a risk of being greedy and reading into the numbers. I think it's important to look at your business model, what you need, what's your story, and be consistent between what you say to your own investors or yourself and what you're going to say to the buyer. That's the most important thing, I would say. The risk is if you start having different answers to different people. That would be a concern. If you're consistent in your business model and your positioning, I think you will do great because the demand is there.
I would say with that deal, the 500, I don't know how much it was, last year, that I think was more like a one-off rather than where the market is going. And it also is related to the buyers that come in and what their aims are. Because some buyers have this more, maybe I would say, philanthropic aim of or wanting to catalyze the market and help it grow. And so they're willing to invest in a way with higher price credits at the beginning. But then when we're speaking to buyers who are looking to secure removal credits in the long term, those prices don't exist really, in those conversations at least that we're having. And in terms of putting biochar down the mine shaft, I mean, again, I think that is related to the carbon removal industry or the carbon removal sector and what we're looking at. So I think in a way there's a bit of a carbon tunnel vision in that if you're comparing, like I said, direct air capture, you're only thinking about the carbon, and so then some producers are looking at biochar and only looking at the carbon. which is one way to look at it. I agree that it's a shame to do that with biochar, but then it depends on whether the aim is just carbon removal, and the co-benefits, like we were saying earlier, are not really valued as such yet, but maybe we need other instruments to actually make these co-benefits valuable, so that to move the sector more towards actually using biochar to improve our soils and food security and everything you mentioned.
Something that was maybe too obvious for me to not even mention, but it's that project developer, biochar projects, they are the one deciding on the price. We don't decide anything. So that was something that's, I think, important to clarify. It's always dangerous to read into the numbers because, behind those contracts have separate, agreements. And also a lot of buyers now are asking for a cost curve. So they're happy to pay higher for the first credits to demonstrate the operations, and then ask for the price to go down as the project is already de-risked with the capital that was injected into the project. So really hard to just look at the number. We can make all sorts of interpretation. Let's bear in mind that there are a lot of parameters behind each deal.
And maybe from a project developer's perspective, and maybe your sales partner as well, I think it's still important to keep in mind that biochar is still a niche product. And even though we all in our biochar bubble might perceive that there's a boom in carbon credits from biochar, compared to the carbon market, it's minimal. It's point something. So, and what usually happens with biochar credits is they're being merged into a portfolio that's being sold to buyers. So, and basically biochar is usually on the higher end. So you might be able to push up the credit price to 500, but you're not going to sell many credits. And I think then at the end of the day, you end up in the same marketability discussion that you do with any other product. And if you as a producer tell your carbon developer and carbon asset retailer, you want a minimum price of 500 euros per ton because you've seen it, a lot of retailers might shy away from you because they say this is an unsellable asset anymore, because the market has also developed towards another point. And I think the Microsoft deal that you were referring to was a pilot for Microsoft as well as a buyer, and you will not see those prices, at least not in the short term, I think.
Yeah, good, thanks. Okay, we have no time, but we're taking one last question.
I'm Randall Crespi from Global Biochar, and to add to the complexity and maybe confusion of this issues, I wonder if you have thought of developing protocols around the use of biochar to create green charcoal. In Africa, I'm a partner in a number of companies which are doing that. And obviously there is RED Plus for avoided deforestation. Green charcoal, traditional charcoal, is responsible for up to 70% of deforestation. But then you have co-benefits like saving the lives of 600,000 women and children each year who die from volatile organic compounds in traditional charcoal. So my question is, is anything like this in your sites?
Well, that would be an offset, not a removal. And most of these folks are in the removal space.
You answered it.
Okay.
But I will say there's a lot of discussions going on amongst the U.S. Biochar Initiative, IBI, the folks in ASTM standards about developing specific standards for green charcoal, as opposed to biocarbon, as opposed to biochar. And I think we need to keep differentiating what is biochar and what is biocarbon, because in the US at least, biocarbon is our biggest competitor. And, there's a lot of people that would like to pivot to selling biochar, but the markets just aren't well developed yet. And so in the meantime, they're selling to the steel and aluminum industry. And it's not a bad thing because they're trying to decarbonize too, but that's certainly not a removal. And we need to keep specifying that, because the last thing we need is more confusion in the biochar world. So thank you, Brando. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Most of these folks have booths. I encourage you to visit them or let us know what questions you have at IBI.